So an interesting day with former President Barack Obama endorsed. So an interesting day in American politics today with former President Barack Obama endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee for the 2024 elections, where she will presumably take on the Republican nominee, who's also former President Donald Trump. Joining me now to decode what has happened today, as well as what's been happening in Democratic politics over the last couple of weeks, is Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, who is head of the India practice at the Eurasia Group. Mr. Chaudhuri, could you begin by explaining what has been going on in the Democratic Party for the last couple of days and weeks since Joe Biden dropped out, as well as the significance of Barack Obama's endorsement of Kamala Harris, given that for a little while there was some speculation that former President Obama wasn't exactly enthusiastic about Harris's candidacy?
So yes, as everybody knows, President Biden, especially after a presidential debate, TV debate with Donald Trump, had shown somewhat starkly a certain degree of mental slowdown, obviously triggered by his age. This has been repeatedly obvious in public events and private statements, but in that debate, he really showed himself to be probably impossible to elect, or as no longer as a credible candidate for the Democratic Party. And at that point, in fact, Trump had been falling or struggling in the polls simply because he had, he'd been convicted, was facing convictions in courts over various fraud issues. But that debate really turned the tables and began an internal discussion within the Democratic Party whether it was time to remove Trump, to find a successor to Biden. And that slowly has built up over the next few weeks, eventually leading to Biden stepping down and endorsing Kamala Harris, his vice president, as the Democratic Party candidate. The convention will actually decide the final candidate, since almost nobody who would be seen as a potential rival to Kamala Harris for the position all of them have endorsed her, and there's a very clear rallying to the flag by the Democratic Party that we have to not show any dissent in the run-up to the convention and during the convention. Harris, as it is, will have difficulties because while she's doing slightly better than Biden, she still trails Trump in what matters in the six swing states that will determine the Electoral College. Not the popular vote, which the Electoral College determines the actual who becomes president. So Obama, yes, there were reports, and I think they're probably true, that he was reluctant. He was personally very close to Biden, and there had been word that when Biden, Obama had finished his second term, he had decided to endorse Hillary Clinton as president, as the next Democratic candidate, rather than Biden. Clinton went down in defeat to Trump, and the word was that Obama regretted that decision. He felt, in fact, as Biden was to show 4 years later, that, in fact, Biden should have been the right person to be the candidate. So he had always been personally very loyal to Biden because of that. But there was strong word that there were several reports, reasonably credible, that I had met Harris a number of times or listened to her and had not been convinced that she had what it took to defeat Trump or to even be a president. But as it is with every other Democratic Party leader of consequence and endorsing her, none of the others prepared to run against her. Obama decided to. I think it was obvious that he had no choice but to come out and endorse her. And on top of that, Biden himself had endorsed her. So Obama's endorsement was necessary, but that it was rather slow. And Harris probably not too happy about that, but anyway, it's been done. And now she will sail into the Democratic Party convention next month with effectively the entire Democratic Party behind her.
Right. If I could address two different things. The first one, of course, being perhaps the weaknesses of Kamala Harris's candidacy, perhaps a little further down. But right now, if I could ask you some questions about lots of commentary right now about how this was the best possible start that Harris could have gotten, considering that her fundraising has broken previous records, and that's extremely important given how expensive American elections are. She's raised over $100 million for her election campaign in just the last a week or so, and you also have, as you were mentioning, the entire Democratic Party uniting behind her. No partisan feuding. Any potential rivals have already endorsed her. So could you talk a little bit about whether how do you see the start that Kamala Harris has had? Some people saying that, of course, best possible start she could have had under the circumstances. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different take?
No, I think it's true. I mean, she's just begun, but she's got the party behind her. There's no serious dissent within the Democratic Party. Biden has endorsed her, Obama's endorsed her, Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, every one of the other potential people in the Democratic Party who are considered presidential possibilities have endorsed her. So that's one element of it. She has got strong endorsement from the most important groups, for example, blacks, Hispanics, and so on, who are core to the Democratic Party's vote. And then, as you mentioned, she's gotten money. And I think partly because there's a certain desperation, if you wish, within the Democratic and the center liberal political wings that they need us to keep Trump out for another 4 years. He is not just Republican, he is a very different kind of Republican. And there's obviously, even in corporate America and Wall Street, a certain concern about what a Trump presidency would be about. And so therefore, she's gotten a fair, that the money itself is something telling. It indicates that the base of her party, as well as potentially independent voters, are prepared to really come out on her behalf, even if she's a bit of an unknown for many of them and doesn't really have a good track record in terms of policy. But compared to Trump, they feel that she deserves their support. Being a black woman, she's also very useful, or identifies as a black woman. She's useful for both bringing black votes on board, the most loyal, if you wish, minority group in the Democratic ranks. But also being a female is useful because abortion, the Republican Party's opposition to abortion is in many ways the most powerful issue among women, even among Republican women. And women constitute a larger number of voters than men in every U.S. election.
Understood. And if I could ask you something about the weaknesses in Harris's candidacy, you said she's still trailing Trump in key battleground states. There are some conversations about her performance as vice president. The American public didn't think too highly of her. What do you think are some of the negatives, some of the drawbacks that she will have to work to address in the coming weeks?
So Harris is not, if you look at her track record, she has not held any major senior positions in government. She's never served in Washington inside a government. She was Attorney General in California, which is a reasonably important position. And then she was a one-term senator for California, but didn't have a particularly distinguished record. But she's never served inside as a minister of anything in Washington. Her reputation is more as an activist, if you wish, than a policy person. And generally, those who have met her come out saying, nice person, not very impressive in terms of her policy capacity. And on top of that, while vice presidents don't really have much to do in a U.S. Governmental system, she had been handed a number of policy issues to try to build a certain brand for herself. Immigration was one. At one point, she was asked to become sort of the person for the Indo-Pacific, and so on. And in none of them did she excel. In fact, she proved, in fact, quite incompetent, or at some points was quite disastrous in when she tried to position herself in the Indo-Pacific. For example, as you may remember, she went to South Korea, gave a speech at a U.S. air base, and confused North Korea with South Korea, and actually said America would defend North Korea against South Korea, things like that. Minor gaffes to some degree. Now, no real damage was done, but on the other hand, there's no positives on the policy front. And we've already seen that, she came out publicly against Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, when he's visited Washington. That itself was not a surprise. Biden, in many ways, was a one-man supporter for Israel within his own administration. And she clearly feels that rebuilding support among Muslim and Arab voters in key states like Michigan is something that she needs to do. But she also clearly made a couple of errors in her statement, seemed to be under the impression, for example, that an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza was really all that was required to end the conflict, which is simply not the case. And, the Israelis quickly told her that we don't care what you say, we will continue to wage our war. And so small things like that, but we'll see. Ultimately, this election will be about domestic issues. And her strongest point is simply that she is not Donald Trump.
Understood. And if I could ask you a point about, how the Trump campaign has been seeing, Harris sort of moving very quickly to unite the Democratic Party behind her. There's been some suggestions that Trump was sort of caught flat-footed by the switch of candidacy with Biden dropping out and Harris stepping in, and that the Trump campaign has been unable to recover some of the momentum that they had post the Republican National Convention, post the attempted shooting on Donald Trump. Do you think that's broadly correct?
There's a tendency right now, I would say, that the media cycle is pushing both the Republican and Democratic candidates, no matter who they are really neck and neck in the popular vote. The Republicans have an edge in the Electoral College. So what's kind of happening is that I would argue the media cycle is kind of pushing each candidate up. So when Trump was down because of his convictions in courts, Biden obviously did very well. The presidential debate pushed the focus onto Biden's mental conditions. Automatically, Trump did very well. Then you have the assassination bid. Trump soars again in the polls, but again, not by a decisive amount. And then Harris and the entire drama of Biden resigning or retiring from declaring that he will not run as the candidate and Kamala Harris being appointed switches the media cycle back to her. And she will do well because between now and the Democratic convention, she will dominate the airwaves. But at the end of the Democratic convention, you will have the Republican convention in between. And the Republican convention will start to push the news back to Trump. So you'll see. I'm sorry, not the Republican convention, but after the Democratic convention, the news will then switch probably back to Trump over various issues. So it's really rather close in my view, and there's very clearly nobody's being decisively powerful in terms of the polling and so on in this election so far. So I think after the Democratic convention, she will get a bump in the polls. That always happens. After that, we will see, then the real fight really takes off.
Right.
And it'll be September, October, the latter end of August, where we will see the two candidates really define themselves, especially for independent and swing voters and in the key states. That's where this will matter, and this is where Harris will have to really prove that she's presidential rather than just necessarily being non-Trump.
Right. And if I could ask you one last question about following from what you were saying, which is that what do you think the X factor issues will be that will decide this election? You said that they're neck to neck, in the polls and in the popular vote. Could I ask you for a sense of what you think personally, having observed so many U.S. elections and having seen the two candidates, Trump and Harris, what do you think the key make or break issues will be for both people? If you could lay out what Harris needs to do in the coming weeks, what her path to victory is, and what Trump's path to victory is.
For Trump, it's very clear. I think the position he's taking is illegal migration is going to be his core argument, that the Democrats are allowing too many illegal migrants who are proving to be sources of criminality, helping cause job problems, and just generally undermining U.S. culture, character, and so on. You saw that in his presidential debate with Biden. He kept hammering everything was blamed on immigrants, and really illegal immigrants. And by picking J.D. Vance as his vice president, he's really sort of, should we say, doubled down on getting white working class votes, for whom this is a core issue. For the Democrats, it will be abortion. In fact, Biden in that debate was supposed to have played up abortion as an issue. He failed to do so, right, because of his mental problems. But it's noticeable that even Trump has been very careful not to come out against abortion. And he has a report say watered it down in the Republican manifesto, in the same way that he has declined to oppose gay marriage, just saying that we will support the sanctity of marriage, because he knows that those are issues that will hurt him with the center and even among Republicans. So I think you'll see this migration versus abortion in many ways as the two core domestic issues that are going to come out. There'll be smaller things on the sides, but those are going to be the two things that they both will hit each other, the two sticks that both will hit each other with.
Understood. Pramit Pal Chaudhuri, thank you so much for joining us here on India Today Global, explaining the impact of the Obama endorsement for Kamala Harris, what we've seen in the last couple of weeks with her consolidating the Democratic Party behind her, and what the electoral map looks like now moving forward, and the math looks like, at least for both candidates moving forward as we head towards the Democratic National Convention and also the election in November. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for watching India Today Global.
Thank you.